I want to tell you about the shooting of the Ribald Tales of Canterbury. This movie was the biggest budgeted movie of its kind, as far as I know, to this day. Now, there have been a lot of other movies that have been made since we made Canterbury Tales that were big budgeted, but those movies spent the majority of their budget on one particular set, like the boat from the Pirates of the Caribbean or something like that. We put that money into the entire production. So you can tell by looking at the movie that the production value is quite different from what you would expect from your average movie of that kind. Back in the day, I was under contract with Caribbean Films, and the first movie that he gave me, it was a handwritten script, and I said, I can write a movie better than that, and he doubted me, but gave me a chance. And from that point on, I had been writing all of the movies that we shot. Now, we only shot 2 every year, so I wrote 2 movies a year. So this was our 3rd year. Harry owned like 800 some different theaters across the country where he played these movies. And these theaters were often getting raided and getting challenged in the courts for the movies that they were playing. And he wanted to make something that would never be questioned. It would be worthy of showing to a judge, to a jury, and that he would be proud to stand up and say, no, this is not obscene. This has more than just prurient interests at heart. This actually is art. This is a movie. So we had sat down together for several days and started brainstorming about what kind of things we could adapt into a screenplay. And we started thinking about traditional literature, English literature, things that you would discover and study in your English lit class, right? So we thought about Lady Chatterley's Lover and a few other books and pieces. And finally, we settled on Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Because if you're familiar with Chaucer's original Canterbury Tales, it's quite bawdy. There's a lot of, well, it's not what you would expect from that era. It's not all prim and proper and everything. It's very loose. As a matter of fact, there was a scene in there that I had to cut out because I refused to shoot a scene like that. It's too obscene for me. It was off the charts for me. And I said, no, we can't really do that. No, I don't want to be involved in a movie that has that in it. So we cut that out. But as the resident author, so to speak, the resident screenplay writer, it was up to me to adapt Chaucer's Canterbury Tales into a screenplay, which really wasn't that difficult, except for the dialogue. There's a lot of thou wiltst and should, you know, the old English stuff, which proved to be a challenge for a lot of the actors, a lot of the more well-known actors and actresses in our business at the time. So if you watch the movie, you might notice some new faces. And these people have never made a movie like this before. They're actually Screen Actors Guild members who we hired to perform in this movie because we needed some people to fill certain roles that could really act. And there wasn't any, you know, extra stuff that they needed to do sexually or anything. We just needed them to act, to fill out our production and make it look legitimate and make it look good. Because we were spending a lot of money on this, $500,000. When it came time to the costumes, because this was shot, you know, in old time. That's why we're using Old English. This was old time. This was a period piece. We needed special costuming that looked like way back in jolly old London, you know, jolly old England back in the day, with the Knights of the Round Table and that kind of stuff. So we went to Universal Studios. And Universal Studios has this huge warehouse, they actually have several, full of costumes. They've got everything: dresses, suits, shoes, purses, hats, anything you can think of from just about every era of history that you could want to shoot in. So they took us into their wardrobe warehouse there, and we went back to the era that we were looking for. They had it all organized by time periods. And we looked through the costumes that they had there and chose which ones we were going to rent for our production. Now, they knew exactly what we were doing. They knew what kind of a production it was, and that was fine with them. They didn't have any qualms about it at all, as long as we returned their clothing in good shape and paid them, you know? So that was a thrill to me, to be able to be on Universal's soundstage, Universal Studios lot, and look in their warehouse at all of their wardrobe and costuming that they have. And it was just amazing, very overwhelming. So that was a thrill to me. Shooting the movie itself was very thrilling because we shot for 9 days. And back then, people were saying things like, oh, they're shooting a 3-day wonder. Like, how are they going to shoot a movie in 3 days? Which, of course, you can tell, this was way back in the 80s, but this was before we had digital cameras and stuff, because we shot on 35 millimeter Panavision. So to shoot in 3 days when you're shooting film is very difficult. They have to keep track of how much film they've got in the camera, how much footage. They can't start a scene that's going to take a long time if they're at the end of the roll, because you'll have to change canisters, change film in the middle of the scene, and we can't do that. It'll be interrupting everything. So to shoot on film is a lot more complicated than it is to shoot digitally. Nowadays, people are shooting a movie in a day. Some film companies, I've heard, are shooting 2 movies in a 24-hour period. Must not be much of a script there. Just a quick film. So this was not that. We had costuming, makeup, and hair, and we had rehearsals for the dialogue. Because, as I said, we were speaking in Old English, so it took a while for people to remember the lines and to be able to deliver them in a way that made them sound natural. And that took some practice. In the end, The Ribald Tales of Canterbury was a marvelous movie and a fun project to be involved in. And it's probably the best movie I made. Although there was a movie I did with John Savage that I'm extraordinarily proud of, it was marvelous to work with him. And that script was very good as well. Anyway, The Ribald Tales of Canterbury is a unique movie, and I was very proud to have written it and starred in it.